Good morning, everyone. Hello. My name is Ron Singh. I work for Digi International. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and listen to me today. My presentation, long-winded title, but the essence of this title, the essence of the presentation is really around the ideas that the last couple of years have seen issues with manufacturing of products and being able to make revenue as companies from products being made and sold out the door in a traditional way, and the need to come up with some kind of software offering or cloud-based offering, or what we refer to as annual reoccurring revenue, to at least bolster your revenue your finance model and give you revenue outside of hardware. So what I do basically say is the last 18 months, post-COVID, and COVID didn't help at all, have seen a lot of companies struggling to make product. There was shortages in semiconductors, and of course there's been a lot of conversation around that and a lot of coverage in the press and so forth. There were factory capacity constraints, particularly as we came out of COVID. People literally didn't know day to day exactly how many people were going to turn up for work. There were transport difficulties. You might recall about a year, 15 months ago, there was a global shortage of shipping containers. We had the incident with the ship being stuck in the Suez Canal. There's just an increased cost on all of those things, plus energy, as I'm sure anybody who's got gas and electricity has fully been aware of. And all those things have impacted the revenue streams of companies who exist by building product and shipping it out the door. And often as not, those companies didn't have anything else to fall back on. They had no additional revenue stream that was giving them cash to cover their overheads, pay their staff, their bills, and what have you. So I stand by the statement there. If your business is completely dependent on shipping hardware out the door, if you've got no fallback and these things impact you at some point in time, as they did many people in the last 2 years, you're going to run into trouble. If you cast your mind back, and we still haven't completely got out of this yet, but the automotive industry was paralyzed from being able to get hold of semiconductors and ship cars out the door. There were, car parks full of half-assembled cars, or there were cars being shipped to customers with the promise that the electronics would be added at some point. So, this really, really did hurt them to measures of billions of dollars. But it wasn't just automotive, gaming platforms, consumer electronics, even smart cards, the plastic smart cards that we all take for granted, whether it's credit cards or SIMs, all struggled in getting hold of semiconductors, and that impacted those companies if they existed just on shipping products. So if you are a company that makes hardware in some way, shape or form, how can you make a recurring revenue? Particularly, how can you use IoT? That's part of the reason we're here. How can you use IoT and apply it to your hardware to give you some kind of recurring revenue? I'll use the term ARR a lot because usually it's something that a customer signs up for and then renews in a recurring, annual recurring way. So you could, for example, take the data from the equipment that you're selling to customers and craft a preventative maintenance program, right? You could sell the data back to the customer in such a way that it impacts their business model in a favorable manner. Or you could sell or lease control of the equipment you're selling onto your customers, and potentially they could then sell that on or lease that on to their customers. I do believe the organizers have got these presentations and they will make them available. So I don't know how that's done, but for sure, or you can contact me on LinkedIn and I'll send you a copy. It's not a problem. So I want to give some examples, and these are real world examples. I'm not going to name customers, but hopefully you'll look at them and maybe see some synergy between what you do or what you're planning and how you can apply these should we say, case studies to your business. So I mentioned at the top on the last slide, could you craft a Surface program which you can then sell back to your customers? So, imagine you're an OEM and you're selling a piece of equipment to your customers where it's running in such a way that productivity downtime is critical to them. They cannot afford for these machines to go offline. So let's say, for example, you make industrial inkjet printers, and I mean the types that print barcode labels for the likes of an Amazon or a FedEx. These machines are going 24/7 because those companies are shipping boxes out on a 24/7 basis. So I'm just plucking numbers out here to make the model work, as it were. But depending on usage, in 24/7 we talk about, those printers could fail every 3 to 7 months to a variety of reasons. Could be clock nozzles, clock tubes, or various parts of the machine, like a pump or a motor overheating, causing wearing out, and so forth. So to accommodate this for your customers, you typically set up a sales support agreement with your customers, which will involve an engineer, your engineer, jumping in a vehicle and driving off to their premises to service these equipments. You'll offer a range of programs, and you'll do it on the basis on the number of visits that this engineer is going to do to the site, the number of machines they've got. So you might say 4 times a year, an engineer is going to come in, service all your machines, make sure they're all running, and then a bit like when you service your car, but obviously, as I said, these things are running 24/7, and downtime is cost critical to your customers. So on top of that, there'll be emergency call-outs, because there'll always be something that might happen, and that's an additional cost and gets charged at a premium to the customer. The agreements, the servicing of these agreements means typically taking a machine off 6 hours. Again, I'm just keeping the numbers easy to manage. So it takes a machine offline for 6 hours for you to fully service it, make sure you replace the parts. Again, think in terms of servicing your boiler at home if you've got gas. And if you've got sort of 4 machines at 6 hours, that's a day of lost productivity, which your customer is having to factor in once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, based on the service agreement they take out, right? And all these machines, today's modern machines, have got an array of sensors inside that actually look for the points of lack of integrity, such as, measuring temperatures, measuring the flow through of ink going through the nozzle and the tubes and so forth, looking for where that failure might be for when the service engineer comes along. So imagine then if you could take those machines and have them connected in such a way that you can see them remotely. You give them some sort of connectivity. And typically you'll connect those sensors to some sort of local connectivity, and that will go to a gateway, because more than likely your customer doesn't really want your connectivity sitting on his network. It becomes a point of IoT vulnerability, a point of hacking vulnerability. So you'd have the sensors in the printers connected to some local protocol, 2.4 gig typically, going to a gateway. That then goes off to a central controller, your servers, where your engineers are managing that. And with that information, your engineering department is in a better position to predict when it's likely for the machine to fail, and then really craft servicing one machine, not all machines. You can plan it, engineer turns up, doesn't take off a whole day of productivity. You can really craft the maintenance program based around the likelihood of failure. So now you're in a position to offer a 4th program. It's much more of a bespoke one. You're not taking machines off, you're not predicting every year, scheduling every year that you're breaking everything down for a day or 6 hours or what have you. You really are focusing on only sending an engineer when there's a likelihood of failure. By the way, which of course is a saving to you, because you're not sending people out on the field on a fixed number of days every year. And of course, by doing that, you are also significantly impacting the likelihood of there being an accidental failure, which results in emergency call-out. So that's an example of where you can take the analytics of the equipment and craft some kind of, and it's usually typically for a large piece of CapEx equipment, where, as I said, productivity and downtime is really critical to the end customer, and they will pay for that. If you are, a company like a FedEx or an Amazon, where you've got so much factory throughput or warehouse throughput, you cannot afford to have downtime. Another example I mentioned to talk about is using the data and selling it back to a customer in such a way that it has a meaningful, positive impact on their business. So let's take, for example, something that is not initially IoT. Imagine you are in the consumables business. You are one of these companies that is contracted in cleanliness and hygiene of bathrooms in office blocks or buildings like this one, right? You sign an agreement with your customers whereby there's a number of bathrooms on a number of floors, and you're providing the paper towel dispensers, and it's your job to make sure that these are always filled with paper towels on a regular basis, and you're charging the customer for that. So you've got lots of buildings on your contracts, and inside those buildings you've got lots of floors, and inside those floors you've got lots of machines. And inside those machines, they will require a ton of paper towels. And you've probably seen them. We don't always know them. Unfortunately, we're a bit like that. We don't always notice these people. Sadly, they can be a little bit invisible to us in our day-to-day routines. But they're usually the ones that mean you can't get in the elevator because they're carrying a trolley and it's full of stuff. And they're going through every single floor, going in, checking all of these paper towel dispensers, topping them up, making sure there's enough product in there. So after a while, your customers come back to you. You notice that you're having to put a lot more boxes on a regular basis into the back of the vans when they go out. Your customers are telling you, I've always got these people coming in on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and there really is a lot of paper towel being consumed because you're billing them for the paper towel, and they can't believe they're going through as much as you are billing them for. And then what you find out is it's sort of a human nature thing that if you've stacked up your trolley and you've gone to a building, you've calculated there's 40 dispensers in this building, so you're carrying 40 cartridges with you, maybe a couple more for redundancy. People don't want to bring the stuff back down again, right? And what you find out is it's very typical for the service personnel to open up a container. It's half full, could even be 3/4 full. I've carried it all the way up. Take it out, throw it away, put a brand new one in because I don't. As you can imagine, so they can come down with an empty pallet, incredibly inefficient, not cost effective, and Lord knows, really, really environmentally unfriendly. I mean, it's literally burning cash, right? So this is something that is completely manual. It's all done on a calculation on a number of containers. If you could apply an IoT model to something as innocuous as a paper dispenser and put in a sensor that detects the level, and again, like the previous model, there's some sort of local communication going to a gateway because, like I've said, your customers typically do not want your equipment sitting on their network. It's a point of vulnerability. You can do the same thing as the previous model. You can measure how many of these containers are actually empty, how many are half full, how many are 3/4 full, and you can tailor the delivery of your staff so that they're only actually going out and addressing the ones that matter. You reduce waste, you save money, it's a greener solution, it's very efficient. And of course, you're saving how much you're packing in a van, you may be saving how many trips the van is going out and doing. So there's also a cost saving to yourself, which covers all the initial outlay of applying IoT to this business model. The third one I mentioned is the idea of selling on or leasing on the data or control to your customer and potentially their end customers. Right? So let's take, for example, you're a manufacturer of these large coffee vending machines. You know the ones I mean, with the big displays and a nice touch panel. You can, select the strength of your coffee. There's, first of all, a whole range of options you've got. And typically, you make this equipment, but you don't sell it to the end user. You sell it to a company who buys in bulk from you, and then leases it to a building like this, or an office block, or a factory, or a warehouse. And their customers lease from them this equipment and the services of making sure that, you know, there's enough coffee powder or chocolate powder or milk or what have you, and paper cups or plastic cups, maybe making sure the machine's serviced, you've emptied the waste container, and so forth. So that's your customer, and the end customer is, like I said, a building like this, or someone who's got that, right? Your customer, apart from leasing this equipment and all the management of the consumables, is also looking for a way of realizing some sort of annual recurring revenue. Is there something that they can do about making the management of these machines more efficient? Because they've got personnel jumping into a van, going to different locations to service this equipment. There's also this potential with this big display here to maybe do advertising or something and create a revenue stream. So your customers and your customers' customers are looking for a way to get a better return on the leasing of this equipment. So as the manufacturer of these equipment, you've also got your own things you need to be responsible for. You need to know that the machines are always connected and that they're working, what the state is. You've obviously got a responsibility to your customer to make sure that they're always working, they're not failing, what have you. Should there be a failure in the field, you need to be able to track all the logs inside the machine and determine who was at fault. Was it a fault of the machine? Was it a fault of the people who are leasing the machine? Or was it end user fault that's caused the machine to go down? So you want to be able to track all that data. Potentially, if you're going to utilize telemetry for real-time data streams, you might need to do that too. Kind of unlikely with a coffee machine. And you need to make certain that your customer is able to utilize certain levels of the connectivity to do things like maybe put videos on there that are promoting or advertising, or be able to go on the fly and change the pricing of the coffees and drinks and what have you. Put screensavers on when the machine's not in use. And you need a platform that is very flexible, and by that I mean you've got a level of control, your customer's got a level of control, and potentially their customers also got a level of control. You don't want to be absolving that control to each other, but you've also got to be able to protect the integrity of the data across each of the levels, because ultimately they're paying for that. So what that would look like, so what sort of data would that be? That could be, as I said, the status of the machines. That could be, is the machine up to date in terms of its firmware and its application software. It could be it could be also any other functionality that the customer or even the end customer wants to add to the machine. From the customer's point of view, it's knowing that the machines are off, nobody's turned it off to plug their phone in to charge it. What's the consuming rate of coffees during times, record when machines are turned off, all this other information that is very, very valuable for them in how they manage it, deployed in the field, and how they ultimately make money from it. So what this would look like is multiple machines deployed out in the field, and then you'd have 3 layers of cloud connectivity. You'd have one that the customer's customer is using to be able to, as I said, maybe change the cost of a coffee. Maybe in the morning, let's say it's a machine on a train platform. Very cynically, you might want to have a higher price in the morning and the evening, and 3 o'clock when kids are getting on the trains to go home. You as the OEM, you need to have your access to it to make sure the machines function, and if there's a failure, why and what you're going to do to remedy it. And your immediate customer needs to be supporting their end customers too. So you need to have these 3 layers of connectivity, a platform that gives you different levels to be able to do that. Hello. There we go. So, a remote management platform is pretty much the tool that allows you or enables you to produce a revenue stream using those three examples. They all hinge on you being able to have some kind of revenue coming from the hardware that's been deployed in the field, whether you're doing it or your customer's doing it or even their customer's doing it. A remote management platform gives you what I consider to be four really key benefits. One is typically it gives you greater access to the end customer. It could be that there's an app associated with your hardware, which they're on their phone or the tablet or whatever. That gives you instant interface with the customer to the point that you could start to preempt repeat purchases by offering discounts and things like that. It's better than any money spent on any kind of advertising. So a remote management platform can give you that. I gave the example, you can craft a preventative maintenance program which really focuses on reducing downtime to the customer. As I said, there are several customers for whom this is really, really key. You can maintain and the management of the product, and that means, for example, over-the-air updates, firmware updates, security patches, because security and remote management absolutely go hand in hand, which is why the next section of that is about security. And then, as I said, potentially you can look at that and you can create a revenue stream from the data analytics that your platform is able to collect, either that you can use for your own benefit or that you can use to sell on to customers. Obviously, I've got to do the product pitch. I work for Digi, as I mentioned. We have such a platform, and it enables pretty much all of those things there in one way, shape, or form. It allows over-the-air upgrades. It allows you to create sub-accounts so that different layers of customer or customer's customer can have sub-access to the different layers of management and data analytics. And if you want to know more of that, we have 2 booths out there, one in the name of Digi and one with our partner Solid State Supplies. And we'll actually have examples of that running on hardware. We are a hardware provider, but I'm not here talking about hardware. I'm talking about how you can make money from your hardware. And I want to talk about security because, as I said, cloud connectivity or any kind of remote over-the-air access and security go hand in hand, because most of the time the immediate thing is, if I do this, I've created a security breach or a vulnerability in my system by adding somebody else's hardware into the equation. And I say this to every customer I speak to when we start doing initial designs with them. Making an IoT secure product is hard. It's hard anyways. Maintaining that security throughout its lifetime is infinitely harder because threats arrive every day. So, who even hacks and why? This is the fun slide. Basically from 10,000 feet, I think there's about 5 different kinds of hacker. I'm sure somebody who's more of a cybersecurity psychologist will be able to tell you that there's a lot more categories, but I think there's 5, right? There's the champion, right? The person on the dark web or on the internet who's seeking the recognition of their peers by being the one who was able to hack, Department of Defense or hack Amazon or hack the unhackable, all right? There's the champion, okay? There's the anarchist. Yeah, you're starting to see a film theme here. I'm a bit of a geek, confession, right? There's the anarchist, and if you've seen The Dark Knight, there are some people who just want to see the world, people who just want to break something because they're vandals. They are the online vandal who graffitis a wall or bends your car antenna, right? They just want to see stuff break, right? This was an important one. There's what I call the vengeful. These are the ex-employees, disgruntled ex-employees, who know a lot about your system. And I read an article about a research paper only last week that said in the order of the 20+% of security breaches are actually done by disgruntled ex-employees who are harboring a grievance of something. So that is actually one to be very, very aware of. There's the ones that always make the press. It's the fraudsters, the blackmailers, the people who want money. They're going to take you offline and they're going to charge you money until you can bring them back. Or as the one that always gets reported in the press, the ones who break into a bank or a security and harvest credit card numbers and addresses and details like that. Okay? And then finally, there's the competitor. And most people don't think that credible competitors are actually going to hack you for your IP. It's actually the ones maybe on the other side of the world, the places where they're less scrupulous about that sort of activity. Somebody wants to hack your IP so they can make a cheaper copy of it and sell it in their region or even in yours. So these are sort of the grades of hackers, and I put them up there because so many customers I speak to don't ever think they're going to get hacked. They always think it's the banks, it's the supermarkets, it's the building society, because that's what the press always covers. But the truth is there are more breaches and more security hacks per day than most people ever know about. And quite simply, it's because companies don't want to admit to it. Who would want to admit to the fact that you were broken into? It doesn't do your reputation any good. And I've got examples here of all sorts of hacks over the last few years, and they were done by different people for all of the reasons I gave you earlier. Some of them were done for financial gain, some of them were done for industrial espionage, could even be political, and some of them are just plain malicious, just plain vandalism. And it's, you know, it's across different industries. It's in automotive, it's into a casino through a fish tank, right? Or the electronics in the fish tank. You know, there's any number of attacks on a daily basis that just never make the press. And it can really not only got it, 10 minutes, thank you. It can really damage not only your reputation as a business, but it can actually damage your factory output because, you know, take for example, whether you're building cars or you're building semiconductors, a breach can take your factory offline for a couple of days. That's lost productivity, that's lost sales, that's still costs because you've got people, you've got a factory, it's being lit, it's got electricity coming to it, that's all cost to you. And not only do these costs and the cost of your reputation come into play, but it can actually do massive damage to the valuation of your company. Some of you will remember last year, Okta was hacked twice. And as a result of that, their share price dropped from 250 down to 70, and they've never really recovered since. I'm sure they will. They're a damn good company. But it wiped millions off their share price and their valuation. So these kind of hacks, people don't think it's going to happen to them until it happens. Okay, the fun slide. Innocuous case in point, smart toilet. Okay, you've gone out, you've got yourself one of these smart toilets. You all know the ones. You open it up, there's a light, there's buttons, all the rest of it. It's freshly installed, pride of place in your bathroom. You got your favorite book, Fleetwood Mac in the background. I don't know why Fleetwood Mac. I don't listen to Fleetwood Mac, but you know, it's there. Suddenly you got a hack. What does that hack look like? The B-Day function is set off when you least expect it. Bit of a surprise. Now, you'd probably think I made it up, and I wish I did, because if I had, I could have come up with that headline, which I think is brilliant. Backdoor vulnerability, right? The point I'm making is, and it was malicious, it's just malicious, it was done for fun. But the point is, when they designed that piece of equipment, at no point did they ever think anybody would take an interest in hacking it. It, of course, did damage to their reputation, which they had to recover. People don't think it's going to happen until it happens. Digi, we're very much on the embedded side of electronics, so we really care about the nuts and bolts, how somebody can hack that either using a probe or wirelessly through the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi links. I'm not going to go through this slide because I'm aware of the time I've got here. I want to finish up. But just something to bear in mind is what can stop you from selling products. And there's been a lot of legislation, and I'm sorry, when this was moved from my computer to this one, it's reformatted it. Behind this picture is the date of January 2023. New EU law legislation came into play, and I've added links at the bottom here, which when you get this presentation, you'll be able to go to the EU website as well as some other websites which give a sort of more comprehensive summary. but they cover new legislation that's in place covering cybersecurity for IoT. These are the base expectations the EU has got of you in terms of your hardware and your software, and how you maintain that through updating security patches over the lifetime of the product. And if you don't comply, you simply won't be able to sell the product in Europe. And if you are a repeat offender, we are being told that the EU intend policing this in the manner to which they police GDPR, which is with big fines. So it's something to be aware of if you're delivering an IoT-enabled product into Europe. There's a similar one for the UK. There is, of course, a similar one for the US. They did theirs in 2020, and it's the process now of being reviewed and updated. And if you're selling equipment for the medical market, there's an even more stringent one. Not only because obviously it carries very, very sensitive medical information that you don't want people to have, but this is medical. This could be a life or death application. Nobody wants a pacemaker that can be, hacked from a mobile phone. We've actually got a paper on our website. This is the Digi document. You can go to our website and download it, and it covers all of the recent legislation, both from Europe and the FDA in the US, covering the requirements for having a medical product. No surprising, yes, we have an offering. We've always had offering that we give away for free in our hardware, but we've now, in the last few months, introduced a software service. And I just wanted to draw your attention to one of the slides on the previous, the point here. With the medical thing, one of the requirements of the new FDA legislation is that manufacturers not only maintain their hardware, but they've also got to publish a software bill of materials and how they manage the security of that over the lifetime of the product. As I mentioned, new threats come out every day. So how do you know that a new virus or a new Trojan or a new hack approach is not making a vulnerability out of a portion of your code or a routine or something in your software bill of materials? So in our tool, one of the things we do is we, apart from all the usual things that we do in terms of hardware and RF analysis, we do a software bill of the materials review for you as well in the tool. It will look at it. You can do it daily, weekly, what have you. We'll highlight new threats, and we'll highlight to you that there are new patches and where you go. What you do with that, whether you choose not to exercise it, is up to you. But this sort of platform, and we're not the only one doing it, would at least allow you to manage the software security side of your products. So just keeping to time, I'll just summarize. Don't let material supply restrictions like semiconductor allocation threaten your ability to have revenue because you can't build a product and you can't get it out the door. Mitigate some of that risk by adding some level of recurring revenue to your sales model. Most of the time, if you do it right, it will pay for itself, not only with your investment, but the customer's investment and even the customer's investment, because they can turn it into a revenue stream as well. And then please, whatever you make, whoever you make it for, whatever market you're in, whatever region you sell to, please do keep up to date with legislation, whether it's global, whether it's region, whether it's market applicable, like medical, that your product is completely compliant. Your reputation rests on it. The value of your company rests on it. There's also things like liability. If somebody, as has happened in the past, if somebody hacks a bank's servers because they got through the heating and ventilation system because there was no security on that and it's connected to the network, who's going to get sued for that? Don't expose yourself to unnecessary levels of liability. That's been my presentation. I know I've run out of time now. My name is Ron Singh. As I said, I don't know whether the organisers are giving this out. I post a lot of stuff. My team are really now nervous because they've just seen themselves up on the screen there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of material about supply chain and the state of the market. I will put this presentation up there as well. And if you'd like to talk to me, I'm on my booth or I'm on my partner's booth. You'll find myself, my colleagues, and I'd like to thank you all again very much for making the time to come and listen to me. Thank you.